Yeah, so based on what I've seen so far, Sam has done A&M, Houston, Texas Tech, and Baylor.
Yep.
And I think those are the only 4 that they've done so far. So I'd imagine Texas and TCU and perhaps others are coming down the pipeline. But, yeah, it was interesting to see. I mean, best recruit pre-internet rankings go with Mike Singletary. I think that's I feel like Baylor's is kind of easy, honestly, in comparison to maybe some others. But
well, he went deep before then and mentioned a couple of guys, but it was like not a part of. But Singletary, the one who's the alpha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything, about his choice, other than I just think for Baylor, like the pre-modern era is simple. It's Mike Singletary, and then to follow that up, the most important, influential, or even modern recruit.
There's no question.
RG3.
RG3, not only at the time, but also with what's happened because he helped bring that program to a level no one thought is imaginable.
I mean, I think those 2 are 2 Mount Rushmore at Baylor guys, and that, you fill out the other 2 spots, however you want to. But, I mean, that's automatic. The best pre and post, whatever timeline you want to use for the internet era of recruiting, it's pre Mike Singletary, post it's Robert Griffin III. I don't think there's any question or much of a debate there. Best recruit in program history, modern era. Now, this wasn't RG3. He had RG3 as the most influential, but I think he could also apply here. It's just it would get really boring if you just labeled the same guy for everything, because you could fill out like 3 of them and put RG3. You know what I mean?
Singletary makes sense. Again, it's the pre-internet era. Right. And Singletary's the one. Elkins and Don Truhl have to be a part of the conversation if you're talking historically. But, yeah, RG3 would be able to be every one of these. Other
than the pre-internet, yeah. But to change it up, best recruit in program history of the modern era, you could say RG3, but KD Cannon, and I still remember exactly where I was when his commit came in. The program was rolling at that time. I mean, camps were a big deal. They were recruiting or starting to recruit really well. They were going to have a great quarterback in every class, and they were going to have really good skill guys in every class, and KD was a high 4, borderline 5-star guy, and, had some connections to the program. I guess Kendall Wright, I guess there would have been some flavor from Kendall Wright because of Pittsburgh and Mount Pleasant, and just sort of they started to carve out that area.
Those schools are all within 25, 30 miles of each other, if not less.
Yeah, so they had some experience in that Northeast Texas area and some ties to Katie there. But I remember when he committed, that was a big deal, and he ended up, bursting onto the scene pretty quickly and had a great run, and has now been playing some semi-pro football. But yeah, I think that he was a pretty huge splash at the time. I don't know anybody else outside of RG3 that you'd go like, oh, that was a bigger recruit.
No, he was a 5-star. RG3 was not, even though he turned out to be 5-star talent and value. KD Cannon, I remember Art Browse telling me this. He went to go watch him play at a game in Mount Pleasant or whoever it was in East Texas. And when he signed with Baylor, he made the comment to us, when he went to go watch him in person for the first time, he was the best receiving talent he had ever seen as far as in a high school game. Not the biggest, strongest, whatever, but was the best high school wide receiver talent and gift that he had ever seen. And, of course, he played, and he was really good at Baylor.
Yeah, he was. He was tremendous, and just a shame that it ended kind of wishy-washy because he was like just the timing of it was the end of the Briles era.
He was so tied into that staff, and I think that even though he played, he had a big bowl game against Boise State. You could tell he had pretty much mentally checked out.
Yeah, he had 4 touchdowns. Was that right in that game?
I don't remember who it was. But
do you remember, Jack? The Cactus, was that too young for you probably? Cactus Bowl. But, yeah, I remember Matt Rule's up in the press box because he had been hired, and he's doing the in-game interview, and there's KD Cannon just going nuts, and he's talking about like, yeah, I would love to have him, and he didn't get to coach him. But biggest bust or most important influential RG3, there's not even a question about that. There's a stadium because of RG3. There's a lot of things around here because of RG3.
KD had 14 catches, 226 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Oh, it was only 2?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess it was the yardage number that was like super monstrous. That are just really stood out. Biggest bust, Robbie Rhodes. Now, I saw one of his other articles where he labeled somebody, and it was somebody who got hurt, and there's a little bit of pushback because of like, well, I don't know if you call bust if somebody gets hurt, right? Like, is it a little bit too negative to go that route? I guess that's up for debate, but Robbie Rhodes wasn't an injury thing. That's not why he was a bust. He came in 5-star wide receiver and basically got in trouble right away or got into some trouble pretty much out of the gates and this never materialized in any way
bit,
whatsoever.
Hit and miss, and then I'll never forget, I get the call that he had been dismissed from the team. Yeah.
So, he just never caught on, got dismissed after his freshman year, and went on to Bowling Green, got dismissed from there. So, that was definitely a bust that, big-time 5-star wide receiver at the time he thought was going to be a star for that offense. Best develop.
I'm sorry. The quote from Briles on the day that he signed, when we were doing the show inside the indoor, he had just met with boosters, alums, whatever. I said, how quickly can Robbie Rhodes make an impact on your program? He said, as soon as he parks his car on campus.
Yeah. Fortunately, I think he hotboxed in that car a little too many times, and that was the issue. But best developmental story, Xavier Howard. Now, I think you could create a little bit of a argument here, right? Because this was as much slipping through the cracks as it was development. I think there is a case to be made for Jalen Petrie here as best developmental player when you look at the fact that he came in as a 4-star-ish to a high 3-star type of a guy. And there were definitely people who thought he could play, but I don't know that anybody was expecting the just enormous impact that he would have in so many ways on and off the field. And then obviously a very high second-round draft pick, helped them come out of the absolute mess they were in to win a Big 12 and Sugar Bowl title. So I think he could have a case for best developmental, and I'm sure there's others that were far less along that ended up becoming great players. But Xavier Howard, I look at him as much as I don't think people realize his situation as much as developed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Jason Smith was not a highly recruited player, ended up being the second pick in the NFL draft, All-American. There's others, but Jalen Petrie, always the great story was he ended up, first of all, was great. Mm-hmm. And is playing really well in the NFL, but also the fact that he was the lone guy that still stayed committed to Baylor no matter the coaching change.
Yeah, so he earns a superlative no matter what, but I think he could be on there. And there's probably others too, but Xavier Howard had an incredible career and, little to no offers, and there's a great Phil Bennett story behind why that was. So we can rehash that sometime. But finally, the one that got away, Devin Duvernay, wide receiver, committed. His brother Donovan had committed, and they were set to go, play for the Bears and be in that Briles offense. And then obviously all hell broke loose, and he ends up decommitting, and both he and his brother end up going to Texas. He had a great career at Texas, has been in the NFL now for a few years, and is doing really well for himself. And I know that they thought he was, much the way you were talking about Katie Cannon, Devin Duvernay, like the way he was being talked about back then was like, this was going to be the next Mount Rushmore guy. He was going to be the next Bolitnikoff guy.
That was maybe one of the highest rated classes they ever had. They were coming off a great stretch. And then, as you said, the scandal, all hell broke loose. Mm-hmm. They lost half the class. And he was one of the first ones after there was so much pressure to let them out of their scholarships. And when he left, the floodgates opened up.
That one, and then Sic'Em leaving too was.
Sic'Em decided to not play.
Yeah, that was pretty much a dagger to the heart of the fan base.
Remember Hudson, the offensive
Patrick
lineman?
Hudson. That one, but see, there's some of those guys.
But he didn't have play. He got hurt too much. He was ended his career, right?
Yeah, he had to retire early medically. There was others that went on to various places and didn't really do much, if anything, so you didn't really worry about it. After, it was funny because initially you're like, man, all these guys, and a bunch of them were 4-stars. There's Cam Martin ended up going to Auburn. Yep. You had Donovan Steiner, I think, ended up at Florida. You had, obviously, Duvernay, Patrick Hudson. Urquidez was Texas really picked apart that class in the aftermath of that. But yeah, Devin was the one. Like all the other guys went their step. Baron Browning was, I think, the following year and was only committed. He didn't sign, so that didn't count the same. But of the guys that signed in that 2016 class, I think that was, that eventually all got released. Some of them were fine, but you never really. It was no sweat off the back, really. But Devin Duvernay was the one that you did see constantly, and you're like, damn, like that guy was supposed to be here, and we're supposed to be watching him, and dang, he's really good. He's as good as advertised. And like I said, he's been in the league for a while now, or for 3-4 years, 3 years now at this point. So yeah, definitely a one who got away. So yeah, pretty spot on. I think you could probably quibble minor, over a couple of them, but I think that they did a great job, and it's fun to look at. And there's various other schools they've hit up as well that you can pour through. So fun off-season read for sure from Sam Kahn.
I just went to 2016, and there's names in there like Bravion Roy now, who ended up, he's in the NFL. Yep. Denzel Mims, They had to work on the fly, and that class was basically destroyed because of that. But a lot, Urquidez is the one that a lot of Baylor fans weren't real happy with because he made some comments. His father made a couple of comments about Baylor. Parrish Cobb would have been a part of that class. Ends up going to Oklahoma. Now he's in prison or went to prison. High level name. Cam Martin has a tattoo still, perhaps even to this day, with Baylor.
No, it doesn't.
He
got that covered up shortly afterwards.
And I wanted to cover him because he was such a great personality and a phenomenal interview.
Well, he's a rising assistant coach now. I think I don't know what staff he's on at this point, but I know he's been moving up the coaching tree here as of late since graduating from Auburn. But yeah, he had the big BU tattoo that he showed up at a camp with, and I remember standing right there and him showing it to Art Briles and to some of the coaches, and you never would have thought right then how that bubble was how badly that was going to burst, that whole scene just a few months later. But no, I remember reading that he got it covered up pretty quickly after that. I'm not sure with what, but yeah, that class got ripped apart, and Devin Duvernay certainly was the brightest of the bunch as far as impact made at the college level and now the NFL as well. So he applies.
Yeah, excuse me. One of the things Kim Coulter was trying to ask about RG3, he was at Houston. He committed to Art Briles at Houston, and then Briles took the job at Baylor, and RG3 came with him. Imagine how things changed there with Baylor football history, much less what it would have been with Briles having RG3 in that offense at Houston.
Well, that's Houston's got away one. I think on their article is that's the one that got away was RG3 since he was committed. Yeah.